Greetings everyone, welcome to another author commentary edition of the Planet Ripple Logs. This time we cover Log 3, Healing, and this is a pretty loaded chapter as you can see just from this page. It's another info dump, this time covering cyborgs and how exactly the Bionics of Minno's time work. I made a whole lore video about this, I'll link it in the description, so I won't repeat everything I said there here. But to summarize, the Bionics of Minno's time are much more crude than the kinds we make nowadays. They surgically jam these cuff things into people's bodies and then just couple prosthetic limbs on like they're train cars. And they always get infections from these things because the body rejects them. So they use this Vitae stuff to stop that. A funny thing about when I wrote this 6 years ago, I didn't know how immunosuppressants worked, which is essentially what Vitae is, it's an immunosuppressant. So while it stops the body from rejecting these parts by breaking the immune system, I wrote about it at the time like it was some kind of healing salve, a healing substance called Vitae. But in retrospect, I still think it kinda works. See, there are some info dumps later in the story that I wrote not to sound like something I would write, a real person in this world, but like something written in Minno's world for her to read. Things like pro-pirate propaganda. So I've since retconned this blurb to be in-universe pro-Cura propaganda, something the manufacturer of this nasty stuff put out to make it sound nice. Exposition is a tricky thing, especially in-universe. Like, stop me if you've seen this before. A bunch of people in a museum. Someone asks the tour guide, hey, how'd the world get to be the way it is? And the tour guide goes, well, as you know. I'm like, as you know? If the characters already know, why do they need it repeated to them? This is like explaining to an adult what cars are when they've driven cars for years, when they've been around cars their whole life. It just doesn't make sense for characters to say things that should be common knowledge in that world. So how do you make exposition sound natural? Well, you just add a few extra steps. Have fun with it. This page, as much as it's aged, is one of my favorites, for just how much information is crammed into it. So these kindergartners, right, they're watching this nature documentary that talks about super piranhas, which are large saltwater piranhas that evolve to live in the ocean in the future. And they just swarm around whales and other prey like a bunch of angry hornets. And it makes sense that they're being exposited too because, well, they're little. Of course they wouldn't know this. But as you see from this little girl, there are some people in Minno's era that don't believe there ever was a land before. They think humans lived in the water but Poseidon kicked them out. We see how the wildlife has changed since our time. We learn that some new belief systems have risen up in Minno's time. We see just how young some cyborgs can be, with this little boy already outgrowing his first cuff and cyborg arm. And that date, 15,000 years, almost 16,000, since these people restarted their calendar. But keep in mind, Planet Ripple takes place 30,000 years from now, so there's a chance they've had to reset their calendars a couple times. So there's a ton of world building crammed into this one page, and it's all being delivered to us, but not to Minno. Minno's waiting for a job interview, and she just happens to be there while the door is open. We're essentially sitting on her shoulder as she watches the kids watching this. And even the whole nature documentary aspect of it feels more natural than if, say, an adult was reciting this all perfectly to the kids. So maybe it seems like a bit of extra busy work, but all this extra scaffolding, this framing, it tells us so much about this world and the people and animals in it. And all in one page. This is one of the most jam-packed pages in the series. And then we get our first glimpse of the merfolk, which I also made an entire episode about. Panels 2 and 4 are shot from behind, and you can even see if you look real closely at panel 4 that the screen's kind of fuzzy. Panel 3 is just a graphic, a CG animation. And panel 5 is the first time we see a merfolk's face. There's a lot of firsts in this chapter, like the first time we see the sky. We're 40 pages into this book, and we've been stuck underwater or inside the deepest bowels of the ship this whole time. This is the first time in months that Minno has seen the sun. You'd think it'd be overwhelming just how bright everything is. I tried to create that effect for the reader. See, big ships like the Ballina stay underwater most of the time, hiding deeper than most pirate ships can go. And the Ballina has full spectrum lights on board, so it's not like they need actual sunlight to grow their crops. But on a nice clear day like this, if it seems safe enough, if there are no pirates around, the crops come out. They just grow right on top of the ship in those domes. I was excited to draw these back in the day. Food is one of those world-building elements I think kinda goes underappreciated. And this is the first time we see merfolk in person. And this scene is very important to me. Just showing humanity and the merfolk getting along, seeing their children playing together, just to, get those good relations between the species started early on. Now, Minnow strays dangerously close to the plot here, but one mention of pirates is enough to steer her away from the overall story. For now, anyway. But even this situation is really awkward for Minnow. Some of these merfolk children are seeing humans for the first time. Now try explaining to them what a cyborg is, why this person looks like a robot. But Noma here is very understanding. Now, this is one of those moments that autistic people have told me is extremely relatable to them, where they're in a social situation and someone's trying to be nice and they just don't know what to do, they don't know how to respond. And to be fair, Noma is kind of just throwing herself into Minnow's personal space, but Noma is quickly going to become one of the most important people in Minnow's life. Now, I love Naum in this scene, Noma's kid, because he kind of brings the two species together. His nose is running a little. Better get a tissue for that. But, you know, it's one of those little kid things. And Minnow is able to quickly connect with him by humming, which, you know, is sort of what whales and merfolk do underwater. It's just singing with your mouth closed. I just feel like this moment humanizes the merfolk so much. Noma's brother is warning the current captain, you know, Andrea's successor, about nearby pirates. And normally, what would you expect to happen in this scene? Especially with the way the captain's framed here. You would expect him to be stubborn. You'd expect him to turn around and go, "Nay, we will not be deterred by these thugs. We will not cower like sea rats." And surprise, surprise, he doesn't do that. He actually listens to Nulk and changes course. That is so refreshing to me. And I know what some people are gonna say. It's like, well, he has to make that mistake or there's no plot. No, there will be. You'll see. I like this shot because the bridge where we just were is still in view, way up there. And this is where we first learn about Minnow's autism. She doesn't refer to it as autism. That word isn't used anywhere in the story. It's like the people have a different word in her time. But this scene is a chance for me to call out an attitude that I have seen shockingly normalized. The idea that autistic people and people with other disabilities shouldn't breed. Because we don't want you infecting the next generation, corrupting the gene pool with your bad genes, your autistic genes. And this is something real people believe, that they purport that one day science will isolate the autism gene, whatever combination of proteins creates it, and eliminate it from the gene pool, prevent future generations from producing any more people like me. Anyone who sincerely desires a future without autistic people, I don't feel safe around you. I don't trust you. I don't think you're reasonable. Stay the hell away from me. And it won't be revealed for a couple more volumes where Minnow heard this, but she's clearly internalized it. She's fallen for it, and Noma is here to shake her out of it. Like I said, quickly becomes one of the most important people in Minnow's life. We also see the other side of those beliefs that were touched upon earlier, where humans were essentially merfolk kicked out of the sea for their sins. Faith is difficult to talk about with Planet Ripple. Noma here is incredulous, but that's not to say that there aren't any faiths in merfolk society, that there aren't merfolk religions. And even for the humans of Minnow's time, you can see how different their faiths are. This next part kinda hurts to say, and I know it's gonna hurt people to hear this, but 30,000 years and multiple apocalypses into the future, I just don't see Christianity or Hinduism or anything from our era surviving into Minnow's time. And I say this as a Christian. Some of the parallels might be there. You know, they might have very similar faiths, just with different names and, you know, slightly different roles, I guess. But again, 30,000 years and multiple apocalypses. Now, as touching as this scene with the dolphins is, real dolphins are not as sweet as people think they are. In some ways, sharks are sweeter animals. Dolphins can be sadistic, but merfolk have been around a lot longer than we have, and they've actually managed to domesticate dolphins a little bit. Now, things started looking up for Minnow a little bit in the last chapter, but this is the first time we see her make a connection with someone new. A new friend. In fact, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Minnow has an easier time connecting with merfolk than she does with other humans. So I guess it's for the best that she just happened to enter Noma's peripheral vision that day. And if she never did, if she never met Noma, the entire series wouldn't happen. Everything past that point is built from their friendship. And it just happened. So get ready for great things. If you want to support my work, you can find the books on Amazon and itch. I just released volume 7, and it's one of my favorite books so far. There's also my Patreon page where you'll get to see videos like this a week early, along with Patreon exclusive content for privateers and up, including some extra Planet Ribble material. See you next time with more of the Planet Ribble logs. Toodles!